Aun dwashmaya naqaddash shmach, te malkutach, nehwe suyanach, ekanna dwashmaya abbar حاولان لحمة سنكان يومنا واش وقلان حوبين إكنا داب حنان شوق لحيوين لا تعلن لنسيونا إلا قصا من بيشة مثول دي لاخي ملكوثة حي لو تشبحتا العالم عالمين Amen. Well, it's been a while since I spoke, and I've been thinking about. I made a trip to the Middle East. That's why I was gone for a while, and I've been thinking about Jesus in this environment that we live in today, and fundamentally, what was different about him, and what did he try to do? How did he change the psychology of an area so stuck in tradition and family and tribal mindset? What did he observe? What did he do? Did he teach to break us away from those shackles that we end up picking up and bound by from early childhood on? And a lot of these things we don't think about of them as shackles, but because they're so embedded in our tradition and our language and our way of thinking and the TV programming and the newspaper, that we just stop questioning a lot of these things. So hopefully tonight I'll shed some light about how Jesus was working with the psychology of the Near East and how that applies to us today, because we live in the West, but yet the influence of the Christian religion and Judaism and now Islam as well in the Western Hemisphere is so embedded in the culture. After all, we live in the U.S. And I know some of our listeners are in other parts of the world, but including Australia and Europe and so forth. And a lot of these, when Christianity spread westward, into these new countries, it was a religion by then, and it had lost some of the fundamental stuff that Jesus was working with. So when we learn about Christianity in the West, we lose some of his fundamental changes that he made, and it became part of the Western culture too, the religion and some of these things. And some of them are just developed by church. Some are developed by later writers of the Bible, like the Apostle Paul. And even in the Gospel of John, the message was catered to the early believers and was in a way trying to make them stick with the new teachings and the new ways of Jesus, but without a clear Christian Eastern mindset and cultural mindset and mystical mindset. John ends up being used in also the wrong ways. So hopefully tonight I'll speak for the next half hour, 40 minutes, about some of these fundamental changes that Jesus was making from the beginning of his ministry, and then how we maybe lost them, and hopefully you'll leave tonight thinking, okay, what are the shackles that I have that I've taken for granted, even if you've been on a spiritual journey for a while. Hopefully you shed a lot of them, but I'm sure that you'll probably, with more analysis, you'll find few more things that you need to cut out to be fully free. And I think that's ultimately the thread of truth that I'm hoping that we can carry on the next few sessions is ultimate freedom. What is ultimate freedom? How can you live a truly free life where it's not like you could be in jail and free, you could be at work and free, you could be in any social setting or by yourself and feel this no weight on you type of freedom, and you can do anything you want, you can think anything you want, and be a really good person in your setting and in your community. So where I'm going to begin is I usually use the Gospel of Matthew because it's the most Eastern and it has a lot of the stories are expanded. But I'm going to venture into the Gospel of Mark today a little bit just for the fun of it. And he also highlights some of the slight differences as if you do any analytical type work with the Bible between Matthew and Mark. Mark is more kind of like straightforward bullet point to the point, and he had a lot more focus on Jesus's healing ministry. It's like when you start reading Mark, you'll see that a lot of healing. So the book was used to also bring people into the new movement by demonstrating that we have a lot of power over what makes us ill. Any disease, any even psychological disease, that the early movement was really strong at promoting healthier living and healing methods coming from Jesus. But Mark was really into that. Versus Matthew talks about it, but not quite with the frequency and persistence, especially in the beginning of the Gospel of Mark. So where I want to begin is Matthew. And by the way, if you have any questions, whether about the stuff I'm talking about now or anything related to the Bible, please use the Q&A button on the app, on the webinar, and type your questions there, and I'll try to give it time towards the end to answer those questions. And sometimes if you don't have questions, I either keep talking or we end early. So it's really up to you. But if something is bothering you related to the Bible, current events, and how Jesus would analyze them, how would he feel about them, I can probably bring that perspective as well, which is part of what I'll be talking about in the next few sessions as well. So in the beginning, and this is an interesting story. So soon after Jesus came in, like felt he's ready for his ministry, he went and was baptized by John the Baptist, who was the prophet of his area, well known, and even some of the stories in the Bible tell us that they might have been cousins. So John's movement was important for Jesus and for the early movement because John was close, but he was, according to the writings that we have, felt that he was not the Messiah or the one who's coming to save Israel. He knew that he was basically building the path for somebody else to come and walk into that path. And you'll notice if you read carefully about John and John's disciples, you'll notice that a lot of what the early writers of Matthew and Mark and so forth were trying to recruit from them. So as John died and was killed, the early movement had these ripe recruits that they tried to attract and bring them in because the message was very close. And Jesus honored John the Baptizer, or we call him the Baptist, maybe incorrectly. So soon after he was baptized and declared himself, and he was humbled. Also, he humbled himself, which was very important for this man who was going to be looked at as the Messiah, that he was not above the people. He was part of the people, and he insisted that John baptizes him. So that humility, that ability to really demonstrate that he's not any better than anybody else was part of Jesus's ministry from the get-go. So he leaves John, and if you read in Mark says basically he went to be tempted by Satan in the desert. And he won that argument. It was really like one verse, and then it's done. In Matthew, he goes into the detail of the temptation. So with part of that temptation, I'm not going to go into that because I've talked about it before many times. I've done like whole sessions about it. But part of that temptation, and that I want to focus on, is this idea that Satan was the last thing that he was tempting him with and I'm reading from Matthew chapter 4, verses 8 through 10. Again, the adversary, see that they don't call him Satan here, but the adversary in the Lamsa translation, because it's our own thoughts. Like, what am I about? What am I going to be about? What is my ministry going to be about? So he took him to a very high mountain, and he showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. So now we're talking about political power. Kingdoms mean political power, nations, nationalities, armies, economies. That's what kingdoms represent here. And he said to him, all of these I will give to you if you will fall down and worship me. So think about this offer. If Jesus was going to be a Messiah and a king in the form of David and Solomon, or even Moses, they were political leaders. They built castles and walls and armies, and they fought, and they had concubines, and they were builders of nations. So they were after the nation of Israel and its success. So here is one of the first steps that the Gospels tell us about Jesus is he was offered that. He was offered to form a national entity, a kingdom, and be crowned as a king, a political entity that probably had a spiritual aspect to it, because that was the mission of Israel, is to enlighten the world. Now that was lost in time, and that's why the prophets constantly spoke against some of this formation of a temple and so forth, and like constricting that presence of God and spirituality into just a nation and just an exclusive approach. So here Jesus is getting offered not only to be the king of Israel, but to be the king of all the kingdoms. And that's an internal dialogue. What is my ministry going to be like? What am I going to do? What am I going to preach? And he turns Satan back. And then Jesus said to him, get away, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve. Then the adversary left him alone, and behold, angels drew near and ministered to him. So now, basically Satan gave up. He tried to tempt him because he was weak and so forth, with food and abundance in that way. And he said, no, I will not be tempted by that. Then finally, he basically said, I'll give you all the power in the world, in the world. And you will basically be the King of Kings. And that's how a lot of what we learn about religion, we want to put Jesus in that position of being the King of Kings. But he was more about making us kings of our own domain, kings of ourselves, kings of our life, in control of our life, in control of what happens to us and how we treat ourselves and others. So that's the big shift. So he left the desert with a clear perspective on what his ministry needs to be about. So then he had to remember, now he's a man in his late 20s, early 30s. So he's been also observing the corruption of society and how they've tried to put him in a box. And that's our journey. He had that same journey, and he decided that my ministry is going to be about undoing what society is putting pressure on us to do. So, and now I'm going to probably jump a little bit around, but we'll see how it goes. So now I'm going to Mark, and what I did with Mark is the Gospel according to Saint Mark, is I just went sequentially through it, and I stopped, and I have some other examples from different, like from the Gospel of John, and some of the stories have been also in Luke and Matthew. But so using Mark alone, I'm going to chapter 2, verses 15 through 17. So this is an early episode of his ministry, at least that the way, if we assume that they captured these stories sequentially. And it came to pass that while he was a guest at his house, a great many revenue officers and sinners were also guests with Jesus and his disciples, for these were many, and they followed him. So they're telling us that he hung out with people, and part of what the part of the group that he was with were viewed. Now, tax collectors, I know I spoke about it. I know Dr. Eriko spoke about it a lot. Tax collectors were absolutely hated by the Jewish community. Hated by pretty much anybody except their families. So that we see a lot of examples throughout the Gospels about how he was affiliated with them, and he actually worked with them. So, but he also used them. Jesus himself, in some of his talks, used them. It's like, wouldn't tax collectors do that? So that's how awful the reputation of a tax collector was at the time of Jesus. Mainly because they were contractors who basically bid on how much money they can extract from the community, and they used all kinds of bad ways to get the money out of people, especially poor people. So they would crash their homes, take whatever they want, and then because they were commission based, whatever they made above that, some went to the Romans, and the rest they kept. So that's how they lived also. So they were really despised, and yet because they worked for the Roman government at the time of Jesus, they were protected and despised. So here is, and sinners. So these are people who were labeled by community. See the programming. Okay, just the fact that I said tax collectors and sinners, we already have in our minds who are the sinners, right? So if I told you the sinners in your community, you probably would rattle a few names or a few professions or something like that of people who are sinners. So now you got a rabbi, a religious man, a spiritual leader, supposedly the Messiah, is now hanging out with these people, sitting and eating with them. So that's Jesus breaking the shackles that society put on him. You do not affiliate with those people. You do not you do not associate with them. You shouldn't be seen with them. But he took it even an extra step. He didn't just say hello to them in the street. He sat with them and ate. And that's so when they asked him, now who is the keeper of the traditions? Who are the keepers of the traditions in our community today? Government plays a role. Government has no presence. It has representatives. So we have people who tell us what's right and what's wrong. In our families, we have traditions. We are from the family of blah, blah, blah. That's an important thing. Then we have all the other things that constantly remind us of our affiliations. Each one of us probably carries an ID from a state. You carry a passport. That's part of your affiliation. You carry, you go to school and you become a wildcat or a panther or a Bruin or whatever, and you get that affiliation. And when you see people wearing the other colors or whatever from other schools, all these things constrict your being, and then make the brain is so good at judging and processing quickly. We are looking at AI as an amazing invention. We invented AI, but our ability, our eyes to brain connection, our ears to brain connection are so fast and so precise that when we see somebody walk by, we can make a lot of judgment about them. So then who calls Jesus out here? And when the scribes and the Pharisees saw him eating with the revenue officers and sinners, they said to his disciples, "Why does he eat and drink with revenue officers and sinners?" So these are the keepers of religion. So do we, I mean, in our religion, and the Catholic religion, we're supposed to go, and I grew up and experienced this, and I had my first communion, and I did go to confession. So I can speak from a place of experience. Okay, I am supposed to tell the priest my sins so he could give me a prayer or something to do for God to forgive me. Okay, so this is religion. If you talk to anybody about things that you've done badly, they sometimes will, tell you what you should do to beat yourself up so you can cancel that. So, but here, so the Pharisees and the scribes were the authority, and at the time of Jesus, they sat on the corners. They counted people's steps on the Sabbath. They watched people when they ate. I'll give you another example in a second. Okay, so they were the keepers of that. So what did Jesus tell them? His reply to them was that people who are not ill don't need a doctor. So if you want me to just sit, very smart response. If you want me to just, go and hang out with all the good people, then I'm missing the people who really need my ministry. And then he shut him out basically that way. So when you see people who are below you socially, or having trouble and so forth, instead of judging them, think about what can I do to make their life better. That's one of Jesus's approaches. Okay, now continuing. So he moves on. He leaves the situation, and now he's walking, and still in chapter 2, verse 24. And the Pharisee said to him, okay, and came to pass that while Jesus was going through the wheat fields on the Sabbath, his disciples walked and pulled off the heads of wheat. And the Pharisees said to him, so now the Pharisees again, look what they are doing on the Sabbath, that which is unlawful. See, they didn't talk about unspiritual. They didn't talk about, some spiritual teaching. They said it's unlawful. And that's important. Jesus said to them, have you not read what David did when he was in need and hungry, he and those who were with him? I'm not going to read you the David story, but if you're interested, it's in 1 Samuel chapter 21, the first few verses in that chapter. So here Jesus is using another Jewish leader to demonstrate that it's okay to break the Sabbath rules. But the fact that he used the word unlawful is because they have developed the teachings of the Sabbath. See, the Sabbath was supposed to be a time for us to take a break. It was really like almost the invention of the weekend was the Sabbath. So we're thankful for that. But then, because it came spiritually and it was almost viewed as an order, the religious authority expanded their authority over the Sabbath and defined it to the nth degree and continued to define it. So by the time Jesus was there, you're not supposed to eat. You're not supposed to cook. You're not supposed to light a candle. You're not supposed to walk more than you need to walk, like to go pray and come back. You're not supposed to work. You're not supposed to save one of your animals if it fell down a ditch. You have to wait until the next day or ask people who are not Jewish to do it. So those laws were developed by men. And Jesus continued. He said to them, I'm skipping a couple. The Sabbath was made for the sake of man, and not man for the sake of the Sabbath. The Son of Man, therefore, is the Lord also of the Sabbath. So he declared himself as the Son of Man. See, he's not referring to himself as even the Son of God. So it's just as a human being, I am Lord of the Sabbath. The Sabbath was made for me, not me for the Sabbath. That mindset. So he's shifting, and this is he's arguing with religious authority, and he used the Torah and the writings to actually argue with them. Hopefully you're seeing a pattern beginning early on. We're chapter 2 of Mark, so this is early on. He came in fighting. He knew his time was limited. He knew that he needed to make changes, and he was teaching those changes as quickly as he could. Then one of our biggest, I think, controllers in life. It's hard for me to say. But it is family. Okay, we begin our affiliation from the beginning, and I know some people might say, I grew up as an orphan. There are exceptions, but if you grow up in a family, if you grow up in a Near Eastern family like Jesus was, that family has a hold on you. That the family, that an extended family, and I love my family. So I'm lucky in that I fell into a time and space where at least the people who are around me immediately and extended, we love one another. We have our issues like any other family. We argue. We sometimes when we speak, we sound like we're yelling at each other. But that grip is so powerful. And Jesus felt that, and he changed. See, one of the things that I know that Dr. Erko has been talking about, about Jesus as the Messiah and the Son of God and so forth. So when he affiliated himself as the Son of God, when he removed the label of the family, see, we view it as an exception. But what he throughout his ministry, he said, for you to become children of God or sons of God, because the Aramaic language usually uses the masculine. If he was writing today, especially in today's culture, he would say, for you to become children of God, you must be all-inclusive. You need to become the peacemakers. You need to become meek. He constantly was pushing us to become children of God. So in that is the loss of affiliation with the family, with the immediate affiliation, because otherwise that limits you. Even the man who came to him and said, Lord, what else can I do? He asked him, it's like, follow the commandments, do this, do good, do this, do that. And he said, I've done all of these things. He said, then, leave everything and come with me. In that case, he was saying, leave all your business and so forth. Same thing with the guy who said, I want to leave I need to take care of my dad because that's my family duty, is to take care of my older father until he dies, then I can come and follow you. So business, we view business as just the money, but business not only is the money, business is also the family, because in the Near East, business was owned by the family, and if you belong to the family, your responsibility to run that business, because you're supporting all your brothers and sisters. Sometimes if the father is dead, you're supporting his wife or wives and their children and so forth, especially if you're the eldest son. So when the man couldn't leave his business, when the man couldn't leave his dying father, all these duties, all these loyalties are holding them back from following a teacher and an enlightened teacher like Jesus. That's the power of Jesus. So when the subtlety of these stories, if you're not familiar with the Near East, if you're not familiar with the history of where Jesus grew up, and those things, when he told his disciples, the apostles, then when the Pharisees and Sadducees and scribes heard him speak these things, and the rabbis, because he spoke these things also in synagogues, they were pulling on their beards. They were going like, what the heck is this guy doing? How could he ask us to disobey all the laws that we've been developing and we took for granted as the truth, as the way to live. How could he tell us to leave our businesses? How could he tell us to leave our older parents? Didn't the Bible or the Torah teach us to take care of our parents? And now he's saying, let the dead bury the dead. Let somebody else basically take care of that. If you're enlightened, if you're awakened, that's what that message was. If you're awakened and you're hungry for this truth, come and follow it and live by it. And believe me, when you do so, you would be 10 times better to your dad who's dying or who's getting older, because you'll be serving him from your heart, from your soul, because you're a good person, not because it's your duty. So then those are the subtle things that in your transformation into a follower of the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, you're now becoming a child of the universe, a child of God, a child of goodness. And all these things will fall into place. You don't need a scribe to monitor your movement on a Sabbath, because your movement is going to be above his law or her law, whoever is monitoring you. So that's the transformation of Jesus. But he was dismantling, he was breaking those shackles. And think about it. If somebody told you right now, drop everything you're doing and come follow this man named Jesus, because he's going to take you into a better place in life, you're going to struggle with, oh, I have a mortgage, or I have payments for my kids, or I have school to finish, or whatever it is. So we have a lot of these things that hold us back. But he wasn't trying to make us fail. He was trying to remove the hold that these things have over you, so you could grow spiritually. So continuing with the next piece, which I started talking about, is family. Again, this is still in Mark. Now we're moved to chapter 3, verse 21. And this is the setup for the next few verses. So here's Jesus. He came and he started his ministry. He started healing. He started speaking at synagogues. He started having followers. He has apostles and having disciples, but his family has a view of him that does not match what he has become. The awakened man that he became with this open spirit and free spirit. So what is the family's reaction to him? And his relatives heard of it. You can read the story before that. And went out to seize him, for they said, he has lost his mind. Because he's arguing with the scribes. He's arguing with the Pharisees. Don't you think the Pharisees and the rabbi during the service pointed at the mom and the brothers and sisters and uncles and aunts that he had in the synagogue, and told them, your Jesus is causing trouble. He's questioning, he's letting his disciples eat the Sabbath, and he's arguing, and he's hanging out with sinners, and he's eating with the tax collectors. What kind of a son did you raise? They heard those stories, and they wanted, because he did a healing also on the Sabbath, and they wanted to go seize him and bring him back, basically put him back in shackles. And I mean, think about it. So this is Jesus, and this is very early on in his ministry. In other stories, he leaves Nazareth. When he returns to Nazareth, they chase him out of the synagogue, wanting to, he was at the synagogue and he spoke, and they chased him out and they wanted to kill him. And he ran. He said, no prophet will ever be respected in his village, in his town, because they have traditions, and then they have a view of you that is, when you start changing, you're going to run into challenges. People will not immediately accept you, but that's not why you're doing these things. And you are going to go be swimming against the current. Okay, when you start awakening, when you start loving people that your whole family told you to hate, and when you start looking at people with different skin the same way you look at yourself, and your skin. And when you start loving people who are in different religions and different denominations, because you can see them as people, not as the label that's put on them, your community is gonna fight with you. It's gonna try to either hold you back or reject you altogether and push you away. And you might feel alone, but then you're joining a bigger community. You're finding the spiritual community that will give you the comfort that you need. And that comfort will come when you're by yourself. So that's the risk. And as I said, the guy that Jesus was going to ask him or asked him to leave his father was going to serve his father and love his father for all the right reasons and feel so light in serving his dad and getting him to his grave gracefully, because he's not doing it out of duty, he's doing it out of love. That's the transformation. And don't go fighting with your community if they try to hold you back when you're going through this kind of transformation. Embrace them, continue to love them, because you are going to be the example that takes them into that next stage. They themselves will open up. They themselves will see that whatever their community was locking them in, now it's going to open up and it's going to get better. Because if they are good people, you want that goodness to be spread. You don't want it to be held within just the church walls that you have, or the mosque, or the synagogue, or even your business. Because now we have also business religion, we have school religion, we have all these different things that hold us in place. Your political parties. Again, if you have some good ideology, spread it, share it with the enemy, because if it's good, it's going to make everybody good. If it's bad, then you shouldn't be holding on to it, and you shouldn't be preaching it anyway. So that's the transformation. So how does Jesus respond when his family is sitting out there trying to seize him, literally grab him physically and take him back probably and put him in a room and lock him down because he's embarrassing them? He's changing the traditions. He's going against all these traditions. I'm almost sounding like that song, Tradition, which I'm not, because that song is actually re-emphasizes this tradition. So in verses 31 through 35, Jesus says, then there came his mother and his brother. So he was sitting, hanging out with his friends, and they came, his mother and his brothers, and stood outside, and they sent in to call him. So they're still chasing him down. But the people were sitting around him, and they said to him, behold, your mother and your brothers are outside asking for you, which is, you're supposed to honor your family. They're out. They came all the way to speak with you or whatever. And he answered, saying to them, who is my mother and who are my brothers? Broke the family shackle right there in front of them. And he then pointed at them, and he looked at those who sat near him and said, behold my mother and behold my brothers. He's pointing at them. You are now my family. I'm more than that last name. I am more than that kid who grew up in Nazareth. I am with the people who are getting me. And that's that. And now we know that some of his family came around and joined the movement, and we hear about his brother became very prominent in the early church. We don't hear about him much until after the death of Jesus. So again, you see that when Jesus was driving, the movement was breaking all these shackles. When Jesus died, the apostles struggled. That's why the last time I spoke, I held the Bible and I said, this is what's good in the Bible. Because after that, Paul was trained as a Jewish scholar. So he tells us that. And a lot of the time when he actually gives his opinion, he tells us, I am telling you this from me, Paul, based on what I've learned and based on my sometimes things that were handed to me by the church, not by Jesus. So at least sometimes he declared that what I'm telling you might not agree with Jesus, but that's all I have. So we see the same thing happening in the early church. The half brother of Jesus, Jacob or James, becomes one of the leaders of the early Christian movement. And maybe he was a great guy. Maybe he was very young when Jesus was preaching, and then he learned the things. And what we hear about him is he was a good early follower. So, but that's pulling in, and they refer to him not as just Jacob, the guy who joined, as the brother of our Lord. So they know that part of his status is that family relationship. We see that also happened in Islam 600-700 years after Jesus, and after when Muhammad died, he had no sons to inherit, and maybe this was by divine wisdom, but I want to say 4 caliphs in, his nephew was elected as the leader of the movement. So there was another, his best follower, and so forth and so forth. And then when they got to the nephew, somehow got on the seat, that created the divide between what we know today as Sunnis and Shiites, because as soon as a family member came in, they wanted now the bloodline to take over. So Jesus was onto something, because he's an Eastern man, and he knew that if I went out and I left my followers and the people I'm affiliating with and went to my family, then I am re-emphasizing what culture and what society is demanding of me, and I failed. So he stuck with it, and he said, now you are my mother, my parents, and you are my brothers and my sisters. That's transformational. That's very, so remember, we're still in what, chapter 3 of the Gospel according to Mark. One of the things I like about the Gospel of Mark, just as a side note, is that he doesn't have any of the birth stories and all that, the legend that was added to Matthew and Luke. So if you just take Mark, and as your like true gospel, you won't have to deal with the Christmas story, you won't have to deal with the Magi, you don't have to deal with gold and frankincense and all the stuff that was added later. Okay, moving on. How are we doing on time? Uh-oh. Okay, well, I guess I see a few questions, so I'll stop here, and next week, unless most likely I'll be doing next week. So next week I'll start with where I stopped, and I'll go to the questions. Okay, I took a breath because I break the Q&A from the talk when I post it on YouTube, instead of stopping the recording and restarting. Does the Bible actually use the word Satan? I was told that the Bible has no reference to the devil. Okay, so you're doing two things in this question. You're using Satana, which is the tempter, which if you really dig into it, it's not a person. It's that voice in your head, and we get that. A lot of the time when we're doing something devilish or against I guess what's expected, whenever we have these thoughts, these wandering thoughts, and that's the Aramaic way of defining what Satan was, what the Satana is. It's that sound in your head. Now, biblically speaking, you have to go to the book of Job to find the first introduction of this being, Satan. There are now religion. So what I'm giving you is biblical. Religion has done other things. Like if you ask a Christian today, where do we see Satan? They probably will tell you in the Garden of Eden, in the Adam and Eve story. Satan was the snake. If you talk to a rabbi, you probably will get a different answer. So yeah, in Job, we have this entity, this being that actually God listens to it. And a lot of the things that Job goes through is because God is letting this tempter give Job, a hell of a time, because Job was so faithful and so loving to God that basically almost like a bet. Satan said, "I'm going to break him. Give him to me, and I'll break him, and he'll give up on you." And God said, "No, he's my best man. Go at him. Make him miserable." And it's a story that to deliver something that we actually, some bad things happen to good people. Ultimately, it's the story of that. So that's the condensed version of Satan. And the devil, the doula, same, and the concepts continue to develop all the way to Dante and hell and the domain of the devil. Jesus was not about that. He had a tempter in his head when he went into the desert, and the tempter was asking him, "What is your ministry going to be about?" Because he had these, like any one of us. Am I going to be the greatest king? Am I going to rule the world? Am I going to be the richest man? Is this what this is about? Is that what my life purpose is? And those are the questions that Jesus was asking himself in the desert. What is my ministry going to look like? And he came out of that saying, I am going to create the best version of me, and I'm going to share that with people so they can all have the best version of them. And I'm not going to shackle them with anything. See, that's the trick about Jesus, is that he does not shackle us with anything. He says, you have enough opportunities to mess up and be punished for it. If you follow me, you won't be even thinking about doing the things that are considered messed up in society. He wasn't worried about God. He never worried about God punishing you. He only told you to watch out for society, because society has all these laws. And he even said when the disciples were eating with him, he said, the time is going to come where these laws are going to apply again. When I'm not here, things are going to revert back to a bad form. But and it's unfortunate that he even thought that the time might come. But he was hoping that the shift happens towards his teachings, not to revert back to the bad stuff that was already built. And it took time. It took hundreds of years. Well, if you give the scribes hundreds of years to continue to interpret the Bible, and that's their job, and that's how they make their living, they're going to make more rules, more things. That's the problem with religion today. They're constantly sitting in committees trying to figure out the next thing. We need to get away from that. We need to give the power back to the individuals and support them to become the best individuals they could be. And that's how we create a great community. Now, because when you're raised in with that mindset, you have the temptations, and I'll go more into the rest of his teachings, because he tackles other issues as well as he's breaking these shackles. Can you briefly explain the value and use of the Lord's Prayer or the Our Father? Is it designed to be a general template for prayer, an invocation for summoning God's support, or a symbolic representation for the proper relationship between God and humankind? I am sure Jesus quoted many other prayers, but why has this prayer been so widely used over the centuries? What made it so special? The Lord's Prayer, what made it so special is in every sentence that he gave, in every phrase that makes up that prayer, he bonds us with the Father, the parent figure, the beloved. But he also gives us a very specific formula for faith, for forgiveness, for even some playfulness in it around when he says, do not let us enter into temptation. We, I spoke about this, and I know Dr. Errico has done classes and classes, and we have more. There's a great book by Dr. Errico about this, published by Unity, Setting a Trap for God. So what makes this special, this prayer special versus, it is definitely a template. So back to your question, it is a template. You can develop your own versions of prayer. Ultimately, though, look at it closely. It's not about asking God for anything. The only time we are asking God for something in the Lord's Prayer is when we ask Him, keep us out of trouble. And do not let us enter into temptation, is keep us out of trouble. Because Jesus knew that we will be at a place or at a time where something is going to tempt us. And we might take a step in and be tempted. So, but then he said, all you have to do is repent, is basically turn around and go back to God's ways, back to the goodness that he was teaching us. So if you dismantle it phrase by phrase, it's an amazing prayer about faith, about relationship with God, about how to deal with problems, about forgiveness, and that's what makes it so special. You can build on it. You can take one phrase and meditate on it, and it will open up. And it's all about listening as well. So it's a prayer that invokes us being able to receive God's thought instead of the typical prayer that we are taught in schools and in churches of ask God for healing, ask God to stop the war, ask God to give you more money, ask God to bring you a better partner, ask God to make the kids behave better, ask. This prayer was not about asking. It's about connecting with God and then listening and then being able to be that presence of God. So that's what makes it special. Great question. How can there be a separate evil entity when all that is of God? Absolutely. And that's why I said it's the story of Job that they were trying to tell us a specific lesson. So there is no entity. There is no fallen angel. That was misinterpreted. Again, Dr. Errico, read the commentaries, that contact the foundation if you really want to dive into that teachings about that the false devil, that because there is no such thing. Everything is God. That's what Jesus focused on that. But then we do have tempting. We think sometimes in kind of crazy ways, and that's what Jesus' teachings help us to deal with that, and ultimately goes to root cause, so we don't have those crazy thoughts. And when we don't have war, we don't have enemies, we don't have any need to have conflict in our lives. We find that peace, we find that freedom, and we can trust each other, which is something that we are starting to lack more and more, and we're getting distant from it via social media, via isolation, work from home, and we're not developing the skills that we need to be a better people with one another. So that's one of the reasons I'm talking about these things. But you're absolutely right. There is only God, and everything else is made up by people, and that including the devil. Okay, I have 6 more minutes. I have a few more questions. In current day, with millions of people coming into USA, there appears to be an increase in crime, increase in drug trafficking, increase in human trafficking. Please share, what would Jesus recommend? Jesus was about giving people the best life they could have. Our country, and I know this is specific to the US, but I see you can ask the question if you lived in Italy, because there are people coming on boats from Africa, from the Middle East, and so forth. They're escaping. If you think about root cause, why are people, what would make you leave your beautiful home in California or in Atlanta or in Oregon or Florida with beach views and a boat or even a small condo somewhere or a shack somewhere in the US where you feel you're in the best country in the world. What in the world would make you all of a sudden not even pack a bag, put a sheet, throw some stuff in it, some couple photos, a piece of food, and wrap it up and walk across a country, across a desert, and beg somebody to let you in? Okay, so that's a lot of the people who are on the border are those people. The drug traffickers have tunnels in Nogales and different spots in California and Arizona, Texas border, where they come in and out, and they smuggle millions of tons of the drugs and so forth. And if they want to bring gang members and so forth, they can get in. That's not the problem. Okay, the problem on the border is war in Central America, is poverty in Mexico, and corruption. Those are the things that make somebody, and hopefully we will never see that. I pray and I do all I can, because I can't ask God for it. It's on me to make sure that we don't get into that state, that we as a country, we don't start fighting with each other, where one day somebody can show up here and take my home away, or threaten me enough to make me put stuff in a bag, in a trash bag, and carry it and go to the Canadian border and wait there in freezing rain, trying to get in just to have a chance to live a free life. So does that person come here and cause a lot of trouble, or are they looking for a better life and they're working and picking fruit and collecting trash and doing your yard work and cleaning houses and so forth to give themselves and the next generation a better chance? I think Jesus can see both, can see that there are people who are smuggling in with bad intent, trying to sell drugs. And I'm amazed that drugs are still an issue, because we are slowly taking away the sting and the stigma of drug use. And we're trying to build a society that can handle the fact that if you are going to use drugs, because nobody puts a gun to your head and shove the drugs in your nose, or make you smoke a joint. Usually people do it because makes them feel good, etc. But there are also root causes that we can fix with mental health, better care for people who get addicted, etc. So it's a very complex issue. The border is not really the clash point. The border is now a banner for politics. So we have to be careful of that. Other than that, ask yourself the question, when you walk down the children that are being tossed from a wall and so forth, the people who are drowning in the Mediterranean on rubber boats and so forth, what are they running from? Can we make their life better at their home so they don't even have to think about leaving their home? That's the big question that we always should ask ourselves when we see people migrating en masse. They're running away from war, from abuse, from poverty, from gang violence. And we need to then sort through them. And as a land of opportunity, and we are built on immigrants, we need to figure out a good way to bring in people who can make this country even better, because we get a lot of new ideas, a lot of new energy, new restaurants, new food, new businesses, and hardworking people for the most part. The gangs will always be here, and we have American gangs. We have enough of a gun and violence and drug issue without letting anybody through the border. So hopefully that answers your question. And we are almost at time. I'll take one more if I can answer it quickly. In the time of Jesus and today, couldn't it be possible to become enlightened and do things out of love without being limited or held back by participating in life's opportunities and responsibilities? I think that the answer is yes, in an ideal way, or maybe idealistic way. If we by the time you actually get this enlightenment, you have already subscribed to the social model that you're brought up into. As soon as you're born, your parents go and get you. Sorry, I'm getting a prompt here. My machine is going to shut down. as soon as you're born, you're registered with your government. You're given a national number with a Social Security or the European system or Canadians. So you subscribe to the society. So in a way, it's hard for me to tell people, quit your jobs and forget that pressure and go live a happy life. We've tried in this country, communities that lived within themselves. They created a good economic social system, and a lot of them went sideways for many, for all the wrong reasons. But some of them were successful. And ultimately, you could do that. You could, but we need, if you get enlightened, take that in this day and age, take that enlightenment to your social media, take it to the office, take it to your church, take it to your neighborhood meeting, take it everywhere you go. When you go shopping, to the supermarket, to the pharmacy, wherever you are, be that enlightened presence. And if you can pull yourself away from the shackles of economy, having to pay the bills, having a mortgage and so forth, very few of us are fortunate enough to be able to get away from it and still, and because that is ultimate freedom. Otherwise, you're always going to be working for a bank, for a loan, for kids' education, but we're laden by those responsibilities before we can think. I mean, most people are raised to go get married, go to school, get a job, get married, have children, raise the children, get them, support them to blah blah blah. So by the time you try to break these shackles and become fully free, it's exhausting. And my hope is there is a way out of it. And whether you can do it within the constraints of the system. Jesus was very clear. He said, be in the world, but do not be of the world. So be in it. You have to deal with all this stuff. And he had to deal with all this stuff. And ultimately, he actually got killed by the laws of his time and by the authorities of his time. They kept at him until they caught him and they put him on the cross. But even then, he did not veer away from his goodness. And that's why the early Christian movement was really good, without any structure, just by creating good people and spreading them around the world. And with that, go, be good, be a good follower of Jesus, and I'll see you next week. Thank you so much.